If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the JonBenet Ramsey series. This is episode 11, Overlooked Suspects. We will be taking a look at suspects that have not, or persons of interest rather, more accurately, that have not really been given that much attention. Namely, other pageant dads. Were there shady individuals at the pageants of JonBenet Ramsey that may have had ill intentions towards JonBenet in some capacity? Or are there simply a never-ending stream of coincidences in this area of investigation as well? Seemingly, no matter where you look, there's no shortage of shady individuals and POIs with large coincidence stacks. This is truly a case unlike any other. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting, want to help bring awareness to various unsolved true crime cases, as well as missing persons cases, and also wrongful convictions, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, make sure you allow notifications to come through. You can also support the channel by becoming a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to members-only chats and streams. Like and share the podcast. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So we've gone over quite a few suspects and persons of interest, but the pageant area we haven't delved too far into. I mean, there's so many avenues of investigation in this case. All we can really do is take them one at a time. So I actually don't know where this comment came from. Somewhere on the internet, possibly a forum, possibly an email, but here it is. This is, of course, the Todd Fuss theory. According to one theory, a 68-year-old Colorado woman, Bernice Johnson, who is locked up in prison at the Denver Women's Correctional Facility, claimed that her baby daddy, Todd Fuss, had some role to play in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Given that their child was possibly part of the same pageants, Todd may have possibly been at the same location and event as JonBenet on a few occasions. Johnson recalled a time when she caught Todd leaning on a doorframe where some older little girls were getting dressed. She then asked Todd, "Don't you think it would be a little weird if some strange man was watching your little girl get dressed and put on makeup?" Which resulted in him cursing and lashing out. Johnson also claimed that Todd had revealed he was coming into some money around the same Christmas when JonBenet was killed. However, Johnson is of the opinion that there is no way that Todd acted alone and that he had help from someone. While the claim itself led to a whole new theory of multiple killers, Todd was cleared after his DNA did not match the crime. Although, again, we have to call that into question because the older DNA technology was not very accurate. Nobody has been tested with the newer generation technology. I went over that in the previous episodes as well. So yeah, I don't know why some people put such blind faith not only in the technology of humans, which is of course all of it's fallible. Every generation there's new DNA testing technology that's claimed to be much improved, and I'm sure it is. But it's still not 100%. Either way, it really exposes just how fallible the previous generation technology is, because every generation that the new DNA technology is released, it's hailed as extremely accurate. And then a generation later, all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of innocent people locked up on false DNA matches. But continuing with the Todd Fuss theory, let's go to thesun.co.uk. A lot of people fall for these genetic logical fallacies where they say, oh, this publication is not credible. Well, that may be so, but the information contained therein might still be accurate. As, of course, if you go through all of the Sun articles, some of them contain accurate information. So to hallucinate that none of them can ever contain any accurate information, that's quite silly. That's a staple of coincidence theorists. They love their genetic logical fallacies. But either way, let's examine the information here for veracity while trying not to fall for logical fallacies ourselves. That's what Mindshock is for. The motto here, of course, is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. This article was published July 30th, 2019 by Allison Maloney. Murder mystery: was 6-year-old pageant queen JonBenet Ramsey killed by a sex cult leader who ordered her kidnap for a £96,000 ransom. Pretty 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey smiles excitedly at the camera in a sweet family snap. But just hours later, that lifeless body of the pageant queen was found covered by a white blanket in the basement of her home in Boulder, Colorado. She was snatched from her bed on Christmas night, 1996, as her parents allegedly, right? We don't know the exact circumstances. As her parents and brother slept, also allegedly, then hit over the head and strangled, in apparent kidnapping gone wrong. The case has never been solved, and now 23 years on, a new documentary examines a shocking new theory that JonBenet's murder was the result of a botched kidnap ordered by the leader of a bizarre sex cult. In Hunting JonBenet's Killer, The Untold Story, which airs tonight on Crime and Investigation, former FBI Detective Robert Clark investigates the claims of a female convict who points the finger at her ex-partner and also explores 3 more potential suspects. Here we look back on the case and reveal the new theories. Snatched from her bed, tied up, and strangled. On Boxing Day morning, 1996, Patsy Ramsey started to walk downstairs when she spotted 3 pieces of paper carefully placed on separate steps of her spiral staircase. What she read next made her blood run cold. The handwritten letter was a ransom note saying, "We've got your daughter," warning her not to call the authorities and demanding £96,000 for her return. Distraught, Patsy and her husband called Boulder police, who instantly came over but amazingly failed to find the body of the little girl in the cellar. 8 hours later, desperate dad John found his little girl lying under a white blanket and scooped her into his arms. He tells the show, "It was a rush of relief, thank God I found her, but then I pretty quickly realized that she wasn't alive." A nylon cord was wrapped around JonBenet's neck, her wrists were bound above her head, and her mouth was covered with duct tape. Dad John and Mother Patsy became instant suspects despite evidence of a break in the window of the basement and a clear, identifiable high-tech boot print which was found right beside JonBenet's body, although no one in the family owned anything by the brand. Allegedly. We actually went over the boot print and possibly Burke Ramsey having similar boots. Even when the DNA that didn't match the Ramseys was found under JonBenet's fingernails and in her pajama bottoms 2 weeks into the investigation, police continued to focus their investigation on the family. One theory even wrongly claimed older brother Burke, then 9, had hit her with a torch in a row over a late-night snack, but this was ruled out by DNA evidence. Or was it? The family were finally cleared 12 years later in 2008, 2 years after Patsy died from ovarian cancer at the age of 49, and the district attorney's office apologized for the mistake. The cult leader. The show hinges on a tip-off from convict Bernice Johnson, serving 20 years for attempting to murder her ex-partner, Todd Fuss. She claims Todd and an accomplice could have been JonBenet's killers and that the kidnapping for hire had been ordered by cult leader Scott Kess. And believe it or not, he's not even the only cult leader that's been accused in the JonBenet Ramsey case. So this is a woman, Bernice Johnson. She's been convicted of attempted murder of the guy she's blaming. Well, not necessarily. She's saying he could have been, not that she knows with 100% certainty. At least according to this article. There's a little caption with a photo here. Scott Kess believes he could contact aliens through cats. That's interesting. That is really interesting. In 1989, Bernice was living in Maryland and met Kess, who had formed a group called BDX, Beta Dominion Xenophilia, which he claimed was a level of U.S. intelligence 39 levels above the White House and run by aliens. That's an interesting number, 39 levels. Scott claimed he could communicate to the mothership through cats and recruited female members who became his sexual partners, moving them into his Maryland home, often with their children. But cult expert Mark Powers, I wonder if that's a relative of Maxwell Powers, suggested he may also have been grooming young girls. We had heard that the daughters of the families that were involved in the group, I think one was 13, that he was cultivating to be a princess in the group, Mark says. I'm not really sure what that meant, but what he was involved with the other women in the group, and the natural assumption is that he was cultivating them as the next step. Carruthers' former chauffeur, John Griffin, also believed he was a danger to the girls. Bernice claims Carruthers hired Todd Fuss to kidnap JonBenet and that he wrote the ransom note. The text included the words countermeasures and tactics, buzzwords Carruthers often used, and was signed off with the word victory, another term he favored. I mean, there's got to be some kind of handwriting comparison here as well. It was claimed that the mysterious signature SBTC stood for Scott Brooke Truth Carruthers. Scott Brooke Truth Carruthers, a name he had been known to use. Huh. Why would he sign the ransom note with a name he was known to use, though? That'd be kind of weird. Then again, I mean, if the cats channeled the aliens and told him to do that, I suppose he wouldn't question that, but... In 2002, Carruthers was jailed for plotting to kill 4 people who opposed the BDX, and court documents also revealed a plot to kidnap a 6-year-old girl? Wait, what? In 2002? So this was not JonBenet? It was another 6-year-old. Carruthers denies any involvement in the murder, and a journal written by a follower places him in Maryland on Christmas Day 96. Yeah, but the allegations isn't that he did it himself. Huh. The pageant dad. But it's not the only theory in the show. Mum Patsy, a former beauty queen, had entered JonBenet in local pageants from babyhood, and she was well known on the circuit. Dressed up to the nines, slathered in makeup, and sporting bouffant hairdos, the confident little girl can be seen in numerous videos strutting her stuff on the stage and posing for pictures. She won the titles of America's Royal Miss, Little Miss Charlevoix, Little Miss Colorado, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. But that's not the JonBenet John Ramsey remembers. That was a small part of her life in my book, he says. JonBenet was a little girl that played with our dog and slid down the hill on a piece of cardboard box and rode around on my shoulders. He concedes that someone on the pageant circuit could have been viewing her with something else on his mind. Bernice tells Robert Clark that she and Todd entered their daughter Cinnamon into pageants in Boulder, where they come across the Ramseys, and her partner behaved oddly toward the other girls. I found him leaning on a door frame where some older little girls were getting dressed, and I said, "Don't you think it'd be a little weird if some strange man was watching your little girls get dressed and put on makeup?" She says, "He started cussing, telling me I need to mind my own business." She also claims that he boasted about breaking into houses, and just before Christmas 96, he told her he was going to come into some money. He also put a deposit on a new truck which he couldn't afford, telling the garage to hold it until he could pay in January. The junkyard mechanic. Investigation into Fuss led Clark to another possible suspect, Michael Helgoth, who has already been the focus of one investigation. The mechanic worked in a junkyard in Boulder, and colleague John Kennedy revealed that in the run-up to the murder, he had said he couldn't wait until Christmas, as he and his partner were about to make $50,000 to $60,000 each. Interesting numbers. He also allegedly asked what it would feel like to crack a human skull. He claims his torch, his prized possession, went missing before the murder. And so in Britain, I'm assuming torch is referring to flashlight. A large torch that did not belong to the Ramseys was found in the kitchen of the house after the murder. Did that have fingerprints on it? I mean, what's the deal with the flashlight? Bernice Johnson claimed Todd Fuss had taken her to Helgoth's yard on several occasions and was on friendly terms with the staff. That's pretty interesting. Helgoth died in an apparent suicide in 1999, days after a press conference when DA Alex Hunter claimed police were closing in on the suspects. A stun gun and a pair of high-tech boots were found near his body. The program asked for a DNA sample from Helgoth's family, but they were unable to provide one. Also curious. The Drifter, in a completely separate theory. Retired police officer Jim Benish believes JonBenet's death could be linked to 2 other murders. Tracy Neef, who bears a striking resemblance to JonBenet, was 7 when she was abducted on the way to school in 1984. Her body was found in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains near Boulder. While working on the case years later, Benish came across brothers Todd and Aaron Schonlaw. Aaron, who had a juvenile conviction for sexual assault, had been arrested and jailed for the murder of 4-year-old Lacey Ruff, whose body was found floating in the sea in Hawaii in 1993. Todd gave evidence against his brother, but witnesses claimed, so this is Todd Schonlaw, not Todd Fuss. A lot of Todds here. Todd Schonlaw gave evidence against his brother Aaron, but witnesses claimed the person they saw carry the little girl into the sea was in his late 20s, which fit the description of Todd rather than Aaron. He is also reported to have admitted to a family member that he had done a terrible thing in Hawaii and had been the one to carry the little girl down to the water. All 3 girls were sexually assaulted and then strangled. Todd Schonlaw denies involvement, and a DNA sample proved inconclusive. Determined to clear his name, Todd Fuss provided the program with a DNA sample which did not match the DNA on JonBenet's body. Producers were unable to obtain a sample of DNA from Michael Helgoth. Clark also concludes, although the theory that Scott Carruthers may be connected to the ransom note is captivating, he adamantly denies any involvement, and we cannot place him in Colorado at the time of the murder. The hunt for the real killer continues. I mean, wouldn't the perpetrator deny involvement? How does that prove anything? And if he's not in Colorado at the time, I mean, if he's ordering, it seems like nobody's alleging he was present, just that he ordered other individuals, like Todd Fuss, to do the deed for him. So I don't know how they're determining here that it continues and he's definitely not responsible. I mean, obviously, I'm not alleging he is or he isn't. There's unknown variables here. I'm just saying, if he's accused of ordering something, obviously you don't need to have to be present to order at an actual crime to have ordered the crime. But let's go to the JonBenet Ramsey subreddit. It is also a relatively controlled subreddit. A lot of sham moderators here trying to control narratives. I mean, you see this in a lot of cases. And let's look at some comments here. This is probably going to be very, very amusing and loaded with logical fallacies. Ridiculous, laughable, and ludicrous documentary called Hunting JonBenet's Killer, The Untold Story. Bear with me as I take notes while watching it to sum it up for you lovely people, and we can learn about the absolute expletive theory yet, the alien cat commander. This was posted by Intimidating Vanilla. A&E's piece basically argues in favor of the intruder theory with the lead of Elizabeth Vargas and Robert Clark. John San Augustin, former sheriff's investigator, says that strangers canvassed the Ramsey home 1 or 2 days before the murder and broke into the Ramsey home through the windowsill that faces the alleyway where he places the intruders during the stakeout. San Augustin focuses on the mark beneath the windowsill and the suitcase, which contained fibers of clothing that JonBenet Ramsey was found wearing, suggesting a kidnapping gone wrong. He is a firm believer in the stun gun theory for explaining JonBenet Ramsey's mark on back and face. Although, I'm just going to interject here. For all the people who think the Ramseys did it, this is Mindshock. We don't fall for logical fallacies here, of course. Is it possible that the Ramseys behaved so strangely? And this is what I call the McGuire theory. I am not alleging that it's true. It is simply one of many theories. It may or may not be true. Obviously, there's missing pieces here. But if John and Patsy thought that Burke did it, even if he didn't, and I guess you could, if they don't trust each other, perhaps John thought Patsy did it and Patsy thought John did it. I mean, I think that might be more long odds than if they think Burke did it, and Burke just didn't want to admit to it based on what he thought of his sister and the fighting, and that he had hit her before, possibly with a golf club, whatever that incident was. So either way, what facilitated their actions immediately, I mean, what are they going to do? Double back on their actions after the fact? If at a certain point they believe Burke no longer did it, what are they going to say? Oh, we thought he did it. That's why we lied to the police and everyone. I mean, does anybody expect them to say that? Even if if they had thought that Burke did it at the time, all of their actions could reflect that because they were hiding for him. They were trying to cast doubt on infinite individuals, anything to protect Burke. Because for a lot of people think, oh, well, they wouldn't have done that because Burke's too young, so he wouldn't have been prosecuted. That's not the point. They would probably have lost their son because either they created an unsafe environment, if it's whatever, negligence and all of endangerment of children, all these things, in which case Burke could have been taken away from them anyway, or if there was some kind of psychological evaluation as a result of that, there's still risk Burke being taken away from them, losing their only remaining child, if even if he's not actually being criminally prosecuted, of course. That's something a lot of people forget as well. But either way, all of their actions, all of their seeming lies, could that all be explained? They think Burke did it. They didn't think an intruder did it at the time. And then at a certain point, maybe they no longer thought Burke did it. But what are they going to do? Admit that they lied to everybody about everything because they thought Burke did it and they were going to protect him? Because at that point, everybody's really going to think Burke did it. So they could never admit that, even if their own theory changed. You can't expect illogical people to kind of go through all these different theories and psychological examinations. Obviously, that's why people come to Mindshock. But let's continue here. John Ramsey still argues that no one in his family wore high-tech boots, that the sequence of the killing went strangulation first, blow to the head second, and that the DNA found on JonBenet's underwear and fingernails doesn't match him, Patsy, or Burke, therefore it must belong to the actual killer. New informant Bernice Johnson emerged from a prison in Colorado, where she is serving time for attempted murder, saying that JonBenet Ramsey's death was the result of a kidnapping for hire gone wrong. She claims that Todd Fuss, the man she attempted to murder and the father of her daughter, saw JonBenet Ramsey at a pageant where they entered Cinnamon, Johnson's and Fuss's daughter, and became infatuated with JonBenet Ramsey. Fuss had a criminal record and a habit of picking locks. It's like a habit. Is he like addicted to it? He can't break it. He walks by a house, he has to pick a lock. That's kind of weird. And had been talking about coming into some money and even making a down payment for a truck he couldn't afford during the weeks leading up to JonBenet Ramsey's death. After Fuss appeared frustrated from not being able to get the money he had his mind set on, Johnson says that Fuss acted in cahoots with Michael Helgoth, a suspect who had killed himself after one of Alex Hunter's press conferences. Interesting timing. Helgoth was found with a allegedly self-inflicted gunshot wound, and near him a stun gun and high-tech boots. And a picture of him killing JonBenet Ramsey. Kidding, but I'm laughing out loud at this point. I mean, this is a strange poster here on this subreddit. I mean, they're going to joke about a guy having a photograph of him killing a child. So, I mean, this is the kind of subreddit you're dealing with on the JonBenet Ramsey subreddit. The boots were handed over to the Ramseys by a friend of Helgoth's who firmly believed that he was involved in the murder. The Ramseys handed the boots over to the police, but they dismissed them for being the wrong size. Helgoth worked in a junkyard with a man named John Kennedy, who states that Helgoth had lost one of his most prized possessions, his dun-dun-dun flashlight. Helgoth had told Kennedy that by Christmas '96, he and a partner were going to make $50 to $60K each. But when asked about it after Christmas had come and gone, Helgoth said that the deal had gone sideways. After that, Helgoth changed his hairstyle. His family refused to give DNA samples to match those found on JonBenet Ramsey. Robert Clark then interviewed Fuss and is confident that Fuss is sticking to a script and has more information than he leads us to believe, based on the fact that he flutters his eyelids and looks away when answering questions about JonBenet Ramsey, and that he anticipates the questions, replying with pre-prepared answers. Fuss then submitted his DNA sample through a cotton swab. We then jump back to another one of Johnson's theories about cult leader Scott Carruthers being involved. Bernice really seems to be infatuated with the belief that whoever the killer was, she knew him. Bernice met Carruthers while he was forming his cult, BDX. He claims she says that Carruthers hired Fuss to kidnap JonBenet Ramsey. Dan Fesperman, former Chicago Sun investigative journalist, had written a piece about Carruthers. In it, Fesperman tells about Carruthers and how he thought he was, wait for it, a friggin' space alien. I kid you not, this dude claimed that Beta Dominion xenophilia was a level of intelligence 39 levels above the White House, and that Scott was the earthly leader representative of it. They would communicate to the mothership through cats. At this point, I'm really considering changing the channel and making some empanadas, but maybe some of the rubbish ends up being useful, who knows. Appeal to incredulity logical fallacy and homonym logical fallacy. Anyway, Carruthers also came up with strong put, a workout technique. Is this strong put or stong put? Might be a typo here. A workout technique for which he hoped to gain investors. The commander of cats would frequently travel to Colorado for business. Interesting. Another coincidence there. Huh. Interesting. So of all 50 states, he happens to travel to the one where JonBenet Ramsey lives. I mean, Colorado is not one of the least popular states, but it's also perhaps not as popular as maybe New York, Florida, California, Texas, Illinois, for Chicago anyway. Colorado also notorious for being a hotbed of occult and satanic activity as well. Matt Powers, who helped a lot of former BDX members get back to their senses, explains that Carruthers harvested young girls because women had positive energy and the leader needed all the positive energy he could get, and would groom them to be princesses. Honestly, has there ever been any cult leader who didn't prey on young women or women in general? Expletive creeps. John Griffin, his former limo driver, says that Carruthers went berserk when a third grader by the last name of Hakerman was removed from the cult by her father, who had gone to court to have the child removed from the residence where his ex-wife had gone to live, leaving Mr. Hakerman for Carruthers and joining his cult. Griffin was certain that Carruthers was a threat for little girls, so he turned him to the police, and they found out that Carruthers was planning to kill several enemies of BDX, including Tim Hakerman, and to kidnap one of their enemies' granddaughter. The cat commander had even hired a hitman. So this guy has a history of hiring hitmen and planning kidnap and murder. That is a curiosity, and traveling frequently to Colorado on business, although allegedly not that particular Christmas. I mean, that's a lot of coincidences. I mean, that really is a lot of coincidences. Obviously, it doesn't mean he's guilty in this particular case, but that's a lot of coincidences. Meanwhile, John Ramsey deems this theory as compelling while wondering what the hell he was thinking when he agreed to partake in this expletive show. Probably that it was convenient for him to support any theory that led away from Burke, but what do I know? And here comes Bernice's analysis of the ransom letter and how it connects with Carruthers. Small foreign faction would refer to Carruthers being an alien, because aliens are foreigners, get it? Countermeasures and tactics would refer to Carruthers working for the CIA once upon a time, because of course everyone claims to have worked for the CIA. Victory, exclamation point, would refer to Carruthers actually being from a dimension called Victory, from the Kabbalah mystic universe. SBTC would mean Scott Brooke Truth Carruthers. I wish y'all could see John Ramsey's face while Elizabeth lays down this explanation for him. It's hilarious. Brooke was a middle name used by Carruthers, and truth is just a word he used a lot in his teachings. Just a word he used a lot. I can't even. Then, John Ramsey's reminded that he once testified to having seen a well-dressed couple who looked like they were from the East In the church, the Ramseys frequent. How would he know if they were from the East? I mean, do people in New York dress that differently? Like business or upper class people, well dressed people dress that differently in like New York versus LA versus Seattle versus Chicago versus Dallas? I mean, if they're dressed well, they're dressed well. I mean, it's kind of weird. In the church, the Ramseys frequently, and where they had dinner during the days previous to the murder. When shown a picture of Carruthers and one of his wives, Dashila Lashra, John says he isn't sure if that was the couple he saw. Berenice hypothesizes that Fuss and Carruthers went into the Ramsey home to kidnap JonBenet Ramsey's. Oh, so she is saying that Fuss and Carruthers both physically went there. That's weird. To kidnap JonBenet Ramsey, but she fought back and it got her killed. But when Clark asked her if she's sure that Fuss and Carruthers actually ever met, she says she's not. so she's alleging they committed the crime, but she's not even 100% positive they've even met each other. Okay, so how reliable is Berenice here? In addition, one of the cult members' diaries mentions that Carruthers was in Maryland during Christmas '96. Of course, a diary mentioned someone writing something on a piece of paper is, of course, not definitive proof. Not that they're lying, but they could have been mistaken. Finally, the documentary, if that's the only evidence they have that this guy was in Maryland, I mean, that's not that solid. Finally, the documentary team just gives up and Plain goes up to Carruthers and asks him, hey, did you happen to kill JonBenet Ramsey? And the cat commander says, good lord, no. By the way, I don't believe in aliens anymore either. To give some credibility to this hour and 35 minutes long comedy, the documentary team brings up their last effort to be credible, the legendary Lou Smith. His nephew, Jim Smith, paves the way for the final stretch. Todd Schonlau and his brother, Aaron Schonlau. Jim Benish, a retired detective from Thornton, Colorado, was the Kickstarter for this theory. He solved the Tracy Neef cold case regarding a 7-year-old who was abducted, sexually assaulted, and strangled by Aaron Schonlau, a pedophile who lived near Neef and was also guilty of murdering a 4-year-old in Kauai, Lacey Ruff. Meanwhile, Aaron's brother, Todd Schonlau, confessed that he had done a terrible thing, killed Ruff, and blamed his brother for it. We then see Benish draw a line between the Ruff, Neef, and Ramsey cases. Little blonde girls under the age of 8 asphyxiated and penetrated digitally or with an object. Todd said to his stepdaughter that he knew someone who had been involved in the JonBenet Ramsey case. And records show him working in construction in the Boulder area during the crime. So this would be Todd Schonlau. A lot of Todds here. Of course, the team sets up to finding Todd Schonlau. They search through his trash in order to find some DNA and bring it to Jim Smith. Finally, we learn that Todd Fuss's DNA isn't a match. Carruthers wasn't in Colorado at the time of the murder, according to a journal entry. Schonlau's test was inconclusive. I'm done, people. Peace out. SBTC, sandwich, bacon, tomato, coffee. So this is kind of the level of professionalism you'll find on the JonBenet Ramsey subreddit. Few responses here. I'm watching it really get now and just got to the end. I do feel bad for the Ramseys. The Boulder police decided the family did it even though it wasn't their DNA and didn't focus on anyone else. I have watched several documentaries where they blame the family members for murders until they find out the real killer years later. Not to say that it's never the family. It's frequently the family, Chris Watts, but that, although some people dispute that as well, or at least that he might have not acted alone, but that doesn't mean every family is guilty. I think the Ramseys really love their daughter, and for people to call them murderers for years has to make them feel horrible. I hope they found out who really killed her, but what's more frustrating is cases like the Atlanta child murders. 28 kids were killed, and that was barely investigated. Yeah, we're gonna have to do an episode on that. Yeah, the Atlanta murders, there were 28 children, adolescents, and adults, not just children, at least 28. It was a combination of children, adolescents, and adults that were killed over this 2-year period between July 79 and May 81. And this is, of course, from the area of Atlanta, coincidentally, where the Ramseys also are from, or at least John Ramsey, they had a home in Atlanta as well. I mean, there's just so many coincidences here of all the cities in the U.S. Not that I'm saying there's a connection here in any way, it's just another curiosity. And another point here, too, I mean, a lot of family members love the people that they killed, either accidentally or otherwise. So whether you love someone or not, I mean, and how many men kill women that they love? How many women end up killing men that they love? Either in fits of rage, jealousy, or some situation. That doesn't mean they didn't love the person. So that's, again, just, the complexities of the human psyche. Here's some notes from darkmatter69.blogspot.com. I think I might have actually looked at some information on this blog in the past, but just a couple details from Helgoth here. Allegedly, he told a coworker in November 96, so however many weeks prior to Christmas, me and a partner are going to make 50 to 60K each. Helgoth also called this, quote, a killer deal, end quote. So also, what's strange is it doesn't say 50 to 60K, because if it's $118,000, that wouldn't be exactly 50 or exactly 60K. Curious that the range that he gave just happens to match. After Christmas, Helgoth told the same coworker that the deal went by the wayside. He then changed his appearance and got a buzz cut. So we'll have to do a dedicated episode on Helgoth and the ring theory, which may or may not involve Chris Wolf and Bill McReynolds, the Santa Claus, as well as other individuals. Possibly Pam Pugh. Some people believe she's involved, and she got some other individuals involved. We'll have to examine all of that for veracity. Here's an interesting post on lipstickalley.com by Mark Guerrette. This was posted January 6, 2022, pretty recently, but it pertains to the severity of the skull fracture on JonBenet. And I'm going to read it here. The thing that has changed my opinion on this case from the parents and Burke was the crack in that child's skull. It took my breath away. It is absolutely vicious. I won't post her actual autopsy photo, but the x-ray alone gives the idea. Her skull was nearly split in half. It's another reason why I'm starting to lean toward the intruder theory. I don't think a 9-year-old could do that even with a heavy object. She was also viciously beaten, garroted, and sexually assaulted, and unknown Caucasian male DNA was found in her underwear and under her nails. I believe she was hit during the sexual assault to silence her, or she began waking up as they were carrying her out. I've also considered whether the parents did the rest to cover up Burke hitting her, but it doesn't make sense that they simply wouldn't take her to the hospital. The head injury, untreated, would have killed her, but the cause of death was strangulation. The depth of her head injury wasn't apparent because it didn't show the fracture outwardly. Burke likely wouldn't have gone to prison but to treatment, and if she was being sexually assaulted by them, they could have easily silenced her without killing her. They were in their home. Again, I've been torn by both theories because it's almost as if more than one scenario was happening simultaneously. But the intruder theory is starting to make the most sense to me. And that's a great point. Let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies here. Because it is possible there was some kind of abuse going on, or Burke Ramsey possibly was involved in assaulting her in some capacity, but there was also something else going on. So even if the parents were doing something to her, one or both of them, is it possible that had nothing to do with her death? And it just muddies the water. Hence, the false dichotomy, or aka black and white logical fallacies, being logically fallacious. More than one thing can be true. This is not that revolutionary to any logical thinker. But going back to the severity of the skull fracture, I suppose if we're really arguing for Burke being the guilty party as a hypothetical, is it possible she might have, again, see, the autopsy results, you'd have to have a few different opinions, and in certain cases, it might actually be impossible to determine. Is it possible she was hit in the head and then the skull fracture became worse if she fell and hit her head? Now, I mean, this is obviously very morbid, but if you take like a test skull, like a replica skull, if you hit it with a flashlight, and then let's say you drop it on the floor as if falling on the floor and hitting the head, would the skull fracture become worse due to the pressure because the bone's already fractured, so it would fracture farther and wider? So I don't know if we can conclusively state that Burke didn't do it because of the severity of the fracture. But if a fall could somehow be ruled out, or some kind of second trauma to an existing fracture that would make the fracture worse, if that could be ruled out, then yes, it would appear that the intruder theory would have more weight there. Also on this forum, someone asked who would be brazen enough to creep in someone's house with a whole family present. And I guess this individual does not know about the case also in the Boulder area with another individual who was hiding in someone's house for an extended period of time and then assaulting the daughter. I went over that in previous episodes. That's going on within inside of a year to the JonBenet Ramsey death. So not only is there precedent in the area for someone doing this, but Mark Rurette also followed up with this. Remember, Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped from her home with her entire family there, and her sister was in the room. Her sister heard Elizabeth ask, "Why are you doing this?" and he said, "For ransom." He and his wife then kidnapped her and raped her for 9 months. Polly Klaas was abducted and murdered with her family present. He stole a knife from the kitchen, went into the room where Polly and her friends were having a slumber party, tied them up, kidnapped Polly, raped and killed her. Sexual predators are demented and brazen. They don't give a damn about who is around when they are intent on getting what they want. That's a good point. If we're dealing with severely criminal-minded individuals, I mean, you can't just write that off as saying, oh, there's no one. There is no one who would have the boldness. There are no bold criminals out there that would attempt this. I mean, they're out there. Now, whether they actually did it or not, I mean, that's a completely separate matter. But they're out there. All right, let's go over another potential pageant link. This was posted on the JonBenet subreddit, not JonBenet Ramsey, just r/JonBenet, by Lapis Lazuli 1 7 months ago. The Man at the Mall. On December 22nd, JonBenet Ramsey appeared in a show at the Southwest Plaza Mall. A recent podcast on the topic discusses a man who is intently watching her. Here's the information I have seen on this topic from the timeline posted by Jameson, July 17, 2003. December 22nd, there was a little show at the Southwest Plaza. Pageant winners strutted their stuff in the mall. JonBenet was there. It was sponsored by America's Royal Miss and was carried on the local TV station. No list of people who attended that event. From the Killing of JonBenet episode 10 Predators podcast, at her talent show, 3 days before her murder, there's a man in a video that's seen in the background of her talent show intently watching JonBenet. He's talking to another man down backstage, and as she comes on stage, he turns his attention towards her and walks away from the man pretty much in mid-sentence. And the guy turns around to see, well, what are you looking at? And then he sees that he's watching JonBenet. Here's a video from the event. In this video, there does seem to be a man who walks down the stairs to face JonBenet Ramsey when she starts her performance. His head is cut off. It's difficult to ascertain if this is the man mentioned in the podcast, but it's worth noting. Notice what the man is wearing. Khakis and a black fleece zip-up. It certainly looks like some version of the North Face Denali fleece we all owned in the 90s. Do you recall any dark fibers being found on the victim? Any thoughts about this man's shoes? Because he sure looks like he could be wearing a brown high-tech boot. Just some food for thought. A separate video of the event seems to show the same man at a different time during the event. This time we can see his face. Here are the stills. And so this is Inside Edition. They aired this clip. It was uploaded on their YouTube December 15th, 2016, but obviously it is much older. Who knows when they first aired it, but this is all clearly visible. I don't know if this man has been identified, but these clips were all aired on the news here. There's a separate account of a man intently watching JonBenet from the adult Miss Colorado. We are unclear on which event this occurred at. It could have been at the mall event, or it could have been the All-Star Kids Christmas pageant in Denver earlier that month. Now, before we continue the post here, I mean, I don't know if how much can be read into this, because obviously people, when somebody starts singing in a mall, regardless of who it is, people might turn and look and watch. I don't know how much can be read into it, unless, of course, this is possibly one of the other mentioned POIs. An email from UC Professor Michael Tracy to Lou Smith. Several years back, one of my students told me a really interesting story. Susan Rajabi was Miss Colorado in 1996. She was also a student in the School of Journalism. She was in a class where one of the assignments was to write a profile of someone. She asked if she could do one about me. When Miss Colorado, who was also a contestant in the Miss America contest, asks if she can talk to you, one does tend to say yes. So we talked, and much of it was about my having done the first documentary, etc., etc. She told me a really interesting story. She had been a judge at one of the pageants that JonBenet was involved in 1996. After the judging, which JonBenet won, Susan noticed a guy with whom JonBenet seemed very friendly. She assumed it was JonBenet's father and went over, shook hands, and said, "You must be very proud of your daughter." He replies, "Yes, I am." After the murder, Susan was home watching the news with her dad. John Ramsey's photo came up on the screen, identified as JonBenet's father. She turns to her dad and says, "That's not the guy I met at the pageant with JonBenet." I pressed her on it, and she was adamant that it wasn't even close. Interesting. So this is from an email from USC professor Michael Tracy to Lou Smith. Now on the Killing of JonBenet episode 10 Predators podcast. At the last talent show, right before her death, there was a talent judge named Susan Rajabi, and she was also at Miss Colorado. She was also Miss Colorado of 1996. She met a man who was intently watching JonBenet and assumed that was her father, and said, "Oh, you must be so proud of your daughter?" And he replied, "Yes, I am." Days later, she sees the news footage. She realizes, hey, that wasn't her dad that I spoke to. That claimed to be her dad. I believe that it's important to see if the description of this man aligns with the other witness accounts. Are the man at the mall and the pageant man the same? Is this the same man that appeared at the parade? How about the man seen at the gas station in Charlevoix? Or the man in Charlevoix who asked for a ride to the airport? These witness accounts suggest premeditation, and if they can be aligned more closely, a better perp description may arise. And that's a very good point. Because if investigators just put all their eggs in the basket of the Ramseys or Burke, whatever, they wouldn't investigate all these individuals. So now, is it curious that someone would take credit for being a child's father? I mean, I guess, see, that's kind of weird. If this guy was a predator of some kind, would he say, "Oh, I'm not her dad," and open himself up for inquiry on why he's so chummy or friendly with JonBenet and appearing to be her dad, watching her or whatever, joking around with her, whatever, if he has no relation to her whatsoever? And it would be curious if John and Patsy were ever asked about this guy. Has this guy been identified? Was he simply a parent of one of the other kids at the pageant? And if so, that obviously doesn't necessarily mean he's innocent either, or guilty, but again, unknown. But these are curiosities that one would think would have been investigated properly. Some follow-up posts here. Recently, someone commented about the black fiber evidence that was found on JonBenet. I didn't think anything of it until seeing your post, so I Googled, and it seems like there were both black fibers, source unknown, and brown cotton fibers, source unknown. Plus, if I recall correctly, the unknown black fiber was said to be faux. I'm still looking for verification of that. Is it possible the black faux and the brown cotton fibers came from the black fleece and khaki pants? Regardless, if that were true, it would still not narrow down the suspect list. Fleeces like that were super popular in the 90s. Brown cotton could be for many things. And I was just about to say that if they didn't round out their post with that. There's a whole lot of people who wear black fleece and khaki pants. More follow-up posts here regarding the man seen in Charlevoix, both at the gas station and the guy who asked for the ride to the airport. I mentioned this
in our previous episodes regarding Charlevoix. If you haven't checked out the previous episodes in the JonBenet Ramsey podcast series here on Mindshock, make sure you check them out. We go over a lot of stuff. So these were two very significant witness reports. I wish we knew the witness descriptions of the gas station guy and the airport ride guy. I wonder if they could have been the same guy, or they were more likely to have been two different guys. And even if they were two different guys, is one of them connected to the JonBenet Ramsey case? A few more responses here from a Candy Rose description of the guy in the gas station. Well-dressed bum. Other times dressed nicer. Guy was older than college age, mid-30s, carried a lot of cash. He had a strange nose like it had been broke in the past. He had longer hair, shoulder length, talked about ice skating. Said he had unfinished business in Colorado. He puts this incident closer to the end of September, early October. Additionally, in late fall 96, there was a man hanging out at the local Shell station going on about Colorado and brought up John's name. I'm assuming John Ramsey's. Talked about skating, wore a long coat, well-groomed, did not drive, had lots of cash. Wheelchair guy driver tried to contact Ramsey family after JonBenet's death in regards to a person he picked up fleeing out of their front yard who wanted a ride to the airport. I mean, that's kind of strange, though. So there's just some random guy running out of the Ramsey's front yard of their Charlevoix home. Husband of one of the house cleaners worked at the Shell station and reported this to the Ramsey investigators in February 1997. So well over a month after. Gas station is near the corner of the end of the high school football field. The guy apparently hung out by the fence outside too. He did come in, make small talk once in a while, talked about skating a lot. I had a theory at one time that the white cord on her could have been ice skate laces, but after researching it, the material composition for skate laces is different. The guy at the gas station would not have known the cashier was the husband of one of the housekeepers. It was not really known as it was a temp job. He did do a sketch with the original Ramsey investigators in the spring of 97, but no one knows where it is. Probably in one of the many boxes shipped to Linwood. The Ramseys have never seen it. See, I don't know. This is just too mind-shocking for me. So a sketch was done, and it was simply never shown to the Ramseys or anyone else because it was just forgotten. It was just disappeared into box. I mean, this is just weird. Does anybody else find this weird? Boulder PD came to the house 3 times, I believe, and never once dusted JonBenet's room here. Even after they knew about Cowboy Guy, never took bedding, did not seal room. Another close friend and I were the ones who got the house ready for the Ramseys' June arrival, not the housekeepers, in 97, and I should have bagged the bedding. I didn't, as I thought the police knew what they were doing. I wish I had. So this is the husband of one of the house cleaners. Or the house cleaner saying this. Wheelchair guy is pretty much incapacitated now. No one to my knowledge has ever questioned him thoroughly. He lives near me somewhere, but I have been told he isn't doing well. A composite drawing. I mean, why did Lou Smith didn't do any investigating up in Charlevoix? I mean, wasn't he relatively thorough? A composite drawing was made during one of the visits by John Foster. John Foster brought a sketch artist on one of his interviews with the attendant. Sketch in possession of Linwood when Armistead boxes were shipped to him. Sketch was not made public, but she requested it so it can be posted. John and Patsy were not made aware of this composite, and she asks why. I wonder where is that sketch now? Whatever happened to it? Did the wheelchair man who picked up the guy running out from the Ramsey's yard ever give anyone a description? I mean, that's kind of crazy. Somebody gets murdered, a child no less, and nobody manages to follow up from a guy running out of their front yard at their second house. I mean, doesn't anybody find that curious? I mean, how often does a murder victim's family have someone just running from one of their 2 or 3 houses? I mean, it's kind of weird. I don't know. This is the coincidence stack here is just way too high. So from John Ramsey, the Charlevoix police came immediately and the man began telling me a long winding yarn. The heart of his story was that during the previous summer, He had been driving, so this was the summer of 96. He had been driving down Belvedere Avenue, which ran in front of our house, when he saw a young man run down the hill from the direction of the house. Okay, so this wasn't after the murder. So that's less suspicious and less coincidental. The man flagged him down and asked if he could get a ride. When the younger man got in the car, he suddenly blurted out, "I hate the Ramseys and I'm going to hurt their daughter." Okay, never mind. This coincidence is still valid. Although, I mean, if this is true, of course. I mean, we need brain fingerprint scan for all people still alive here. The Charlevoix police wrote down the entire story and took the man's picture. The man said his conscience had overwhelmed him for having done nothing about reporting this incident for an entire year. I thanked him for coming forward now with the information, and the police took him home. I have no idea what became of him or of the information he provided, but the whole episode left me terrified. As I heard more about the story, I discovered that the frantic young man, who also supposed to have said that I had contracted with him to build a secret room in the Charlevoix house, and that I owed him thousands of dollars. He went on to claim that he had a green Pontiac parked in our neighbor's driveway, which he wanted to sell as he wouldn't be needing it anymore. The whole story was confusing and bizarre, but extremely interesting. As the gray-haired man's story wound down, he had made a concluding remark to the effect that, well, you know, the tabloids would pay a lot of money for this story. His final comment hit all my alarm buttons. While he was talking about something that could be very important to us, the man sounded as if he might be preparing to go fishing for cash in the tabloid stream, seeing what his story might be worth. And another point here is, if someone really does have real information and they want to make money off of it, of course they'd go, if they're the type of person that would exploit that to make money off of it, then they would do that. Conversely, there's also people who would make up stories and then try to make money off their made-up stories. The fact that someone's trying to make money off of something, that has obviously doesn't point to the story being true or not. There is a good timeline of events on a Candy Rose. I found this interesting, though, since the suitcase was not neatly packed, or it was so neatly packed, the housekeeper assumed it was the pilots or guests. I have thought that the person could likely have been a pilot, owned their small aircraft, and flown back and forth between Colorado and Michigan. There is an airport in Charlevoix. Charlevoix Municipal Airport is a city-owned public-use airport located 1 nautical mile southwest of the Central Business District of Charlevoix, a city in Charlevoix County, Michigan. Hostess left the house in impeccable order, though she called Patsy in Boulder to say a glass of wine was spilled and asked her what she wanted to do about it. Patsy calls the caretaker in Charlevoix to go check a wine stain and clean it or have it cleaned. She states her brother-in-law and family are coming for a vacation the following weekend. Stain is near the piano. Housekeepers stop there midweek after the party. This is when the discovery of the suitcase and the boots is made. They assume it is the pilot or guest. She calls and leaves a message on their machine in Boulder. She is told later they never got it. At this point in time, the caretakers are not concerned about the boots and the suitcase, as people are always coming and going there. Is that another red flag? House doesn't appear to be disturbed. Hostess cleaned up well. Upstairs is as they left it, except towels are moved. And bed appears messed up and not made the way they did it. They leave. And the Christmas parade stranger from A Candy Rose. This guy is still a mystery. I wonder if anyone was able to determine who he was. It was December 6, 96, during the Parade of Lights in Boulder. JonBenet was sitting up high in the back seat of a Christmas red open BMW convertible with 2 other pageant contestants, waving to the crowd while the song Jingle Bell Rock was played from the car. A plastic sign on the side of the convertible identified her by name and revealed that she was a child beauty queen. So it had her name on there, so potential target there. Family friend Pam Archuleta held JonBenet's ankle to keep her from falling. And is she related to the police dispatcher Kim Archuleta? And that is, of course, the 911 dispatcher who took the call. I went over the Archuletas in a previous episode. And Michael Archuleta is, of course, the Ramsey's family pilot. So a lot of Archuletas in the mix here. As they went past one of the town's leading banks, a strange man walked from the crowd toward the BMW. Archuleta says he looked creepy and had a face full of anger and hatred that she will never forget. She had the impression that the man had seen JonBenet before and recognized her. Well dressed in a tweed jacket and jeans, the man was in his 40s, tall and thin with graying hair. He stared at JonBenet and walked to within 2 feet of the car. For Archuleta, the staring man's behavior marred what until then had seemed an innocent Christmas event that could have taken place in any town in America. But soon the pageant programs were put under sinister spotlight because JonBenet was found dead just 20 days later, and videos of the little beauty's pageant were played endlessly on TV. Now, if this guy is tall and thin and in his 40s, graying hair, I mean, the guys in the pageant video don't really look that tall and thin. They look more average. Possibly even slightly overweight, maybe. Or at least not to be described as tall and thin. Okay, the running man seen early morning December 26th. So there's another running guy? Whoa, what is this? A roommate stated that a coworker, this is new mind-shocking information, I don't think I went over this before. Roommate stated that a coworker in his print shop had heard KHOW radio Peter Boyle AM talk show within a few weeks after the murder of JonBenet. A caller on the talk show stated she saw a running man described as tall, thin, with short brown hair, running from the crime scene morning, perhaps early morning of the day JonBenet's body was later discovered in the basement. Caller stated she had informed police when she realized this eyewitness account might be significant if the running man was running away from the crime scene after killing JonBenet. Caller stated that the police never interviewed her about her claimed eyewitness report. Wow, wait a second. Okay. So the caller stated she gave her name and address. She's a close neighbor of the Ramseys to the police. So, wow. The neighbor, if this is true, I mean, obviously it's an if this is true, a neighbor reports seeing a man running away from the house where a murdered child was killed, and the police don't even interview her. Does anybody else strike this as weird? I reported this exactly or almost exactly this way months or years earlier on Boulder News. Ridicule of this purported eyewitness account has been the main noticeable reaction from amateur investigators. Police have noted the info, but I know of no further information. So are the police saying that this person did claim that the police have verified that this individual did tell them this story? Therefore, Running Man is a valid or at least a valid eyewitness account as far as can be determined to date. I have not yet attempted to get the KHOW taped radio shows to verify, was assuming police would do this. Also, Joe Barnhill, a neighbor and a man in his 70s, saying that he saw John Andrew or someone who looked like John Andrew. Another reason to interview the Barnhills, however, was that Joe had told the police he had seen JonBenet's older half-brother, John Andrew, in Boulder on the evening of December 25th. John Andrew claimed to have been in Atlanta at the time. During the interview, Barnhill sheepishly told us he had made a mistake and apologized, saying that he probably would not even recognize the young man in the crowd. That went a long way towards firming up John Andrew's alibi. Okay, so I'll have to do a dedicated episode on John Andrew. I know a lot of people have requested that. Let's just say for the moment that it's not John Andrew. Just hypothetically, let's say it wasn't John Andrew. Let's say John Andrew has an airtight alibi. I don't know if that airtight alibi has ever been produced publicly, but let's just, for the sake of argument on examining this line of inquiry. So is it possible there's this guy that was cited, then he was cited again, so he's cited by Barnhill the night before, he's cited by another neighbor the early morning of, running away from the house. Is this the same guy who was at the pageant with his face full of hate, and possibly the same guy in Charlevoix, but maybe not the guy in these videos? I mean, these are all curiosities. Let's not fall for black and white logical fallacies. Some of these accounts could be describing the same guy. But if the story is true about this guy claiming he wanted to hurt the Ramsey's daughter, I mean, that's mind-shocking. And if this is the same guy that was witnessed running away from the house in the morning and possibly at the pageant, another interesting post here by Juniper Jane. I tried not to make it long, but I have compiled all eyewitness accounts together for myself to see if there is a common thread in appearance. And there is actually a lot of information regarding odd sightings and happenings leading up to JonBenet's death. Plus, there's the Amy incident, blonde man dressed in all black, the midnight burglaries. The other point of interest to me is the Boulder Shambhala Center, which is about 8 minutes drive, 30-minute walk from the Ramseys' old house. I also wonder if the kids took ice skating lessons anywhere or where they might have gone ice skating together in Boulder. The University of Colorado Boulder Recreation Center has an ice rink, climbing wall, and weight room. The distance from the rec center to the Ramsey house is about 8 minutes driving, 15 minutes walking. So the Boulder Shambhala Center is labeled a meditation center. From their website here, the Boulder Shambhala Center offers introductory meditation instruction, public meditation practice, and a variety of classes on the Shambhala teaching. Now, what's curious is multiple members from the Shambhala Center were arrested in connection with child sex assault. Not just one member, there's multiple members here of various ages. And wow. Members and former members and teachers. So, what is going on at the Shambhala Center? Very, very curious here. And again, going back to whether there's a connection to the pageants, it seems like that's a very, very real possibility if this was not a crime perpetrated by the family, either by accident or not. If this is an intruder, is it someone who had seen her? Because the Ramsey family themselves are very public, as I've gone over. I mean, they even had video postcards that I've gone over in previous episodes. I mean, they were a very, very public family in the newspapers, JonBenet, and all of these public appearances that even had her nameplate or her name clearly visible when she was appearing and announced. So someone who wanted to harm the family, certainly it would not be difficult to track them down just based on how public they were. Now, all of these odd happenings leading up to the death of JonBenet Ramsey, are they all mere coincidence? This guy at the pageant with the face full of hate, this somebody running from the house in the morning, somebody running from their Charlevoix house the previous summer saying they wanted to hurt Ramsey's child. I mean, is this all just too much to be mere coincidence? I will leave it up to the Mindshock listeners to decide. Obviously, we have plenty more to go over, plenty more to cover in typical Mindshock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront. If you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting and thought-provoking, and want to keep up awareness in all these cases, feel free to donate to our PayPal, help support Mindshock, help us get more mind-shocking episodes out there. You can also become a member right here on YouTube for exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get a priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, or you can just go to youtube.com/Mindshock to manually check for the latest episodes. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.